Well, the problem wasn't trying to solve filtering the air. There's plenty of products that filter the air if you get the right stuff. It's all made out of plastic or glass or horrible stuff like that, which you wouldn't want to trust. It's made out of wool and you can trust it.
Welcome back to another episode of a Kiwi Original. Today on the show, I am joined by Nick Davenport, who is the founder and Director of Sales and Marketing at Lanaco, a company that has got a lot of press in 2020 as a potential mitigating factor in the fight against COVID-19. Welcome to the show, Nick.
Thank you, Ryan, and it's a pleasure to be here.
Let's just get straight into it. Did Lanaco and the filter media that you produce from New Zealand wool, was that an idea as a response to COVID-19, or had you been working on this for some time prior?
Yeah, a little while. We started in 2010, so we've had a bit of a run up to this. And whilst pandemic was a word that was sort of always in the background of the business plan and the business model, basic air quality was the target market, which eventuated after the first 2 years of research into how to build wool into an air filter media which could help people. And so while we started to focus on that global air quality became an issue throughout Northern Europe, Asia, North America, all sorts of places. And air pollution masks became one part of the portfolio. Home air ventilation systems, industrial systems, medical products were target markets for our filter media. And so it was all about building this platform capability on the attributes of New Zealand wool. And the science that we had come across early on says this fiber is really darn good at air filtration if you do the right science on it. And so that's why we spend a lot of time. It's been a heavily science-driven project over the last 8 years. And we just happened to land into smack bang into the middle of a pandemic.
With the wool itself, New Zealand, we are known for our wool products and the properties of merino, for example, or its fine weaving ability. What did you see in the wool from a science perspective that it could achieve in creating a filter, an air filtration system, at least initially to remove harmful particulates out of the air from air pollution in China or Asia or the UK? And then how did you go about testing that to ensure that your hypothesis actually worked?
Yeah, really good question. My background isn't in farming or in wool or agribusiness or anything. My background's in industrial marketing and manufacturing. So, and being an industrial marketer and manufacturer in New Zealand, you deal with either an inch deep, mile wide market of customers and products, or you go offshore. And we were focusing on New Zealand manufacturers, supporting them. And our strategy at that stage was to provide the best that we possibly could to make New Zealand manufacturers and exporters internationally competitive. And it was on that journey that I got introduced to a guy who introduced me to this stuff. And he said, this is great stuff. And I spent the previous 10 or 20 years in polymers and plastic fibers. And I thought, well, really, that's not much of a legacy, is it? To say you've built a business out of plastic fibers. Nobody's going to thank you for that at the end of the day. And so wool seemed like, well, and the more I learned about it, the more, and if we could make stuff out of it in this industrial space, then really good. So we started off with a huge array of opportunities where we could take wool and using non-woven manufacturing processes, make materials which were useful to people. So all those properties that we'd sort of heard about in clothing and carpets and stuff, they're all perfectly valid and great attributes. But there was a lot more to dig out of it that we had found in the science that would work in the health space and in filtration in particular. And so that's when we started to narrow the focus on respiratory filtration. And so, yeah, it was a bit of experience based on being exposed to a new material. And yeah, that's focus now on the air quality that people breathe.
At the end of 2019, coming into 2020, when we all started to see what was happening in Wuhan, and there was potentially a virus on the loose that no one really understood or could see coming. At what point did you and the team at Lanaco start to realize that maybe you had a product here that could become in demand either in China or more broadly?
Well, fairly early on. I mean, one of the areas of expertise that we have here is we probably have got, amongst my team behind me, probably the best science and engineering team in making respiratory air filters in Australasia. And we had a manufacturing line to make filter media. So we thought, whoa, New Zealand's in quite a unique, strong position here. Let's make the most of it. So that's when we did a mini pivot. So we had to pretty much drop everything else and just focus on what is the country going to need in terms of masks in New Zealand. We thought, initially, I might be able to export a bit of stuff to China, but it soon moved out of China. And we started to become focused on New Zealand. And that would have been February. We started to really think about what to do here. It's real.
Now, I remember getting a call from you. I think it was early lockdown, so it must have been end of March, early April. And it was a call out of the blue. And I must admit, it took me a bit of time to get my head around where you were already far further advanced, which, in hindsight now seems obvious, but at the time was thinking about how do we get all Kiwis more protected and so they can go about their daily business. How did you go about, talking and communicating the solution you had, which was to, reduce the transmission of COVID-19 into either government or private enterprise to actually set this capability up? Because you weren't doing the face mask. It's just the filter media at that stage, wasn't it?
Yeah, in January, we were making filter elements for other people's devices. Such as we were manufacturing filter elements for 3M in Australia, for example. They were making industrial respirators over there, and suddenly they needed a lot more. And obviously we could keep going, but none of the rest of the world could supply them. So that sort of big stand up and take notice moment. But yeah, making masks, we thought, well, we had some kit in Auckland here, which one of our contractors, my previous firm in actual fact, had been making filter elements with, but not complete masks. And so we thought, well, if we can get some good engineers together, let's turn this kit into full-on mask making equipment and do it fast so that we can execute, because our business is all about, these real honest truths of manufacturing, making product close to its source. And delivering it at source, or just delivering it in one direction. We don't want stuff flying all around the world. So to manufacture masks in New Zealand from where we were was a very, very short step. And but we realized that to get a certified mask, the P2 or the N95 certified level of mask was going to take some time. For us to get an N95 certification out of the US was going to take us more than a year. So we didn't even go there. You can't travel there. They have to travel to see you. So it's just not going to happen. So we stuck with the Australia-New Zealand standards and opted for a P2 level certification for this device, and just went for it. But we realized that was still going to take several months to do. And so the time that I called you, I realized that, well, holy cow, this is going to affect everybody, and there's no masks about yet. Every shelf had been stripped of masks. We couldn't make masks at the time. So what are we going to do? Well, you use the team of 5 million and say, hey guys, there's lots of people there sitting on their bums doing nothing with their sewing machine stopped. Why don't we get people to make reusable, washable cloth masks, and we'll give you the filter. You put the filter in it. You guys do the work. We can keep up with you if you can keep up with the rest of the country. And so we instigated this community mask program, and it's been highly successful. both in the first wave and in the second wave. And the second wave has just been probably about 5 or 10 times bigger than the first in terms of response from the community.
That's certainly what NZ Made, what we've seen as well, because we've got that page with some of the places that you can buy retail masks, that some of them have the Lanaco filter media in there. There's also the organisation, I guess, that was kind of running in a parallel track to you, not so much for the filter media part, but the face mask with Cactus Outdoors, who already had a mask ready to go for removing particulates like asbestos out of the construction environment to protect workers. So they were able to kind of shift their focus from a marketing perspective without having to change anything in the production side of it. Who else really helped enable Lanaco to get your filter media into face masks around New Zealand?
Yeah, good question. I mean, Cactus were more than an early adopter. They beat the trend. They were out of the traps before everybody else. So Ben did a fine job there of coming up with a product for the future and just using his technology, and obviously, which is all his sewing and textile and his distribution network. But in terms of moving to the rest of the community and getting a product which we differentiated it slightly, we took a model from Hong Kong, which we'd heard about in January and February, which was an open source model, because there was actually Hong Kong, what is it, 6 million people or something. They had no filter media. They only had toilet paper or shopping bags. And New Zealand, we had filter media, but we could use the same model. So why not use that same Hong Kong model where the community sewed the mask and we provided a filter to go in it? And it's about reducing about reducing community transmission. If you can, anything you can do to that is going to benefit the country. And everybody got in behind it. So we got approached by some people. I think you put us in touch, Ryan, with some great people, great sewers. And I think at the end of April, early May, we probably had about 10 companies sewing for us on the list. Then we were told that COVID had gone away and everybody lost all their work. So it wasn't until this next time came around, those 10 were still there. But now we're over 100. It's incredible. It's just incredible, the support that it's got, people working together, the collaboration, the getting in behind the whole program and understanding it has been really spectacular. And I think it's been a really successful thing for New Zealand, and it's probably not recognised. The other night I was speaking to Professor Michael Baker. He certainly gets it about the reduction of R and the statistics, but the communication in the public health space isn't very strong, and it's obviously an area that we know very, very well. The greater amount of protection you can take to reduce R, which is about reducing transmission between individuals, the more successful you're going to be at suppressing the virus and protecting the population as they get on with their daily lives. And what we're seeing now is evidence of that, which is a lot of corporations, organizations switching from throwing away millions and millions and millions of disposable plastic masks and now going to here's another one here, a cloth face mask with a disposable filter element inside it. What a great idea. You don't have to have the community on N95 masks, P2 masks to stop this thing. But you need more than just cloth, because no matter how well you tell people what they can use for their cloth, they can't measure how good a cloth is at protecting you from particles that you can't see. That's impossible. So if you put a filter inside those cloth masks, that gives you the level of confidence that you are actually doing something good, not bad. That makes your product better. And so what the Community Mask Program, our ISO, which stands for ISO, the mask, Helix ISO, does that. It lifts everybody's game into a level of performance that they can be trusted. And it's really important at the moment.
Hey, just a quick interruption. Thanks for watching a Kiwi original. If you're liking this episode, then hit the notification button, and that means you'll see when every new episode gets released. We've done 40 already. We've got another 50 lined up. Right, now back to the episode. There's nothing more important, because it's something relatively new in terms of cultural behavior. We all know how to put a hat on or take one off, Make sure the brow's tipped to the front. Put it on a little bit tighter if it's windy outside.
Yeah.
Make sure you wash your hat every so often. There's things around wearing hats that go back, a couple of centuries. For masks, at least in New Zealand, it's not a cultural norm. And I was at the gym earlier this week, and just to watch how people were wearing the mask and then adjusting it or readjusting it, I'm thinking there's a lot of time that's got to go into actually understanding at a collective how to do it. Just like when the internet started, how to use the internet, how to send email. Is there a possibility that wearing masks actually can be harmful if you're not wearing it, or if you're using it in the wrong way?
Oh, absolutely. It will capture particles. And so those particles could be nice particles or nasty particles. So you have to be very careful. So everything that you hear about handling a mask is very, very important. So education on the use of a community mask is key. You should have more than one. You should have more than one for every member of the family. You should really only if you are risking exposure, not touch it. And if you do touch it, wash your hands and wash the device. But if you're in a low risk situation, then it's still helping. If a device actually has the wrong fabric in it, it can actually emit particles. It's weird. Or it can give you a false sense of protection. Now, some of the guidance says if you can see through the mask, it's not a good filter. If you can blow a candle out through the mask, it's not a good mask. Well, that's obvious. The other ones say, well, if you hold it up to the light and you can't see light, it's a good filter. Well, a black polythene bag you can't see the light through, but it doesn't mean it's a good filter. And one of the key things about this is to wear a mask effectively, it needs to be comfortable. And a key part of comfort in a mask, which most people find difficult, apart from something touching their face, is the breathing resistance. And if it's hard to breathe through, it becomes uncomfortable, untenable, and you'll want to pull it off your face and wear it all different sorts of wrong ways. That's really bad. And that's, again, because of our pre-existing knowledge about what made a good mask, a good filter, and having tested thousands of masks from around the world, was we knew how to make a filter element which basically didn't contribute to breathing resistance at all. And New Zealand is so lucky because we're the only people on the planet who are able to make that filter and give it to our people. Nobody else in the world can do that.
What does that mean? I mean, going forward, no one knows where COVID's going to go or end up. And, some are saying this is a 2 to 3 year cycle and we're only at the beginning of what could be quite an endemic phase. What does it mean in terms of the demand from the rest of the world for filter media like Lanaco to protect their own populations? And then how do you balance that with actually making sure that our own domestic population is being able to take preventative measures to actually continue our life and continue our businesses so that we don't end up with other results that are unintended consequences that lockdown create? Because it seems that we're in this situation where, yes, Auckland's been locked down. That's going to reduce the transmission, but it just seems, how do we manage something in a more back to usual way? And can Lanaco as a filter media play a role in that, not just here, but in some of these second wave hotspots we're seeing around the world?
Well, we've got a commitment to look after New Zealand first. We've got heaps of capacity to look after other parts of the world, but we're totally focused on what we're doing here at the moment, as well as exploring our future globally. We see this occurrence as it's been a shift in the Western world. The wearing of masks is a norm in many parts of Asia, but hasn't been elsewhere. And I think there's a whole generation now going to be brought up with a different paradigm. And so the role that we can play in that is significant. And if we look at all of the other filter media products, and you have to say, when you develop a new product, you say, what problem am I trying to solve? Well, the problem wasn't trying to solve filtering the air. There's plenty of products that filter the air if you get the right stuff. But it's all made out of plastic or glass or nano silver or horrible stuff like that, which you wouldn't want to trust. This is made out of wool, and you can trust it, So we've got this product for the future, which is coming from a natural, sustainable, renewable resource. And nobody else has done that. There's a world building up a mountain of used PPE around the world, masks in particular. We are almost a lone voice in creating an alternative to that. So the possibilities that come from here on in are huge, just huge.
What is this going to mean for our wool sector and for sheep farmers?
Good news, obviously. We'll buy more wool. And the value of the wool that we buy, we can pay them to do a little bit extra, to make it better, to make sure it's the standard that we want, the quality that we want. We can lift the value of the supply chain. We can make farming profitable for the wool again. At the moment, they've got some real problems. So, but a subtle thing about the difference of our program, and this is why you asked at the very first question, how long have we been doing this? We're doing a long time. That's because we've actually invested in the breeding program so that we can control the fiber. We're in a really scientific space here, competing against the global industry of synthetic polymers, and we don't take that lightly. So we've had to invest in a supply chain with the integrity, with the scientific proof and the evidence that it works, and the ability to scale it. And so it's how we've taken what the market signal is and fed that back to the farm and through science. So it means we could make New Zealand farming great again in that respect, as a flagship product. It's not going to be the volumes of carpet that we don't think it is, but this stuff is too good to walk on. And this is about high value exports of what New Zealand grows, and grows very, very well. And if anything Sir Paul Callaghan said was, we got to get more buck for what we grow here by using our science and innovation. And that's exactly what we're doing.
It speaks to that whole doing more with less.
Yeah.
And it's just being smart about what goes into it. There is a real race between countries around the vaccine side of it. How well protected is this technology from the filter media side of it? Because I'm sure other countries would love to have the capability that you've brought to New Zealand.
You mean in terms of vaccine affecting the size of the market?
More in terms of the intellectual property around how do you make filter media from sheep wool? Yeah. Well, without answering that in detail.
I answer it in the straight words. It's very, very difficult, and takes a long time to work it out. And that's part of the reason why we invested in a breeding program as well, because the IP is embedded in the fibre, and it's a natural fibre which gives New Zealand a natural competitive advantage. And we can scale that by moving our genetics around the world and providing the product. But because this isn't not, you could make an air filter out of any piece of wool you wanted. You can make it out of recycled knitted merino, but it's not going to work to take out those submicron particles that you can't see. It'll capture the big stuff. What we do that's really unique and different is capture those 100 to 300 nanometer size particles at a high efficiency rate. And believe you me, that is bloody hard to do. And as you move up that performance curve, that's what we've spent the last 8 years doing, moving up that performance curve. And now that we've done it, we can get a product which has only got a couple of grams of wool in it, and it can deliver immense health benefits. So if you think about how many of these are used a day around the world, and there was an article just recently I read last night about 3M building like 65 billion masks a year. We're not going to build 65 billion masks a year, I don't think. If we did, we'd probably solve New Zealand's farming problems. But we'll do a nice chunk.
What an amazing contribution to the next stage of New Zealand's journey. We've had wool blankets for over a century. We've had merino for a couple of decades. This is the next iteration of that, is wool-based face masks, which the world's going to need for at least the foreseeable future. Nick, I really appreciate your time today. But before we finish up, is there any question or area that I haven't covered that I should have asked you?
Well, you're by New Zealand, and we were really motivated by your professionalism at the outset when we first contacted you, and that gave us the confidence to reach out to the rest of the New Zealand community to support this. And I think that was really important for us, because I think it's got a lot of legs, and I think it's a model that New Zealand can be proud of to take forward, to adopt as much as possible, and even then take it offshore.
Thank you, Nick. And I know that the manufacturers that have collaborated you through this period of time have really appreciated your openness and sharing what you know and how this works, to be able to get our manufacturing capability to shift across as quickly as possible, to not only protect the vulnerable, but actually just give all of us a level of confidence that we can continue our daily lives. We can also reduce the spread, and we can provide this to other countries as their needs arises, as they start to go back to a bit more of life as normal.
Absolutely. And it's not something that happens overnight. And our team out here have been working 12 to 14 hours a day for a long time to make sure that this happens and this can work. So I've got a fantastic team that I'm very grateful to have behind me.
Well, thank you to you, Nick, and thank you to your team for what you've been doing, and keep up the good work at keeping us safe.
Pleasure. Take care.
This has been a Kiwi original brought to you by the New Zealand Made team. Thanks for watching. The New Zealand Made trademark is used by over 1,200 businesses in New Zealand. The New Zealand Made team licenses that trademark. Check if you're eligible at bynz.org.nz. If you feel that someone should see this, share it with them now. Otherwise, subscribe to youtube.com/bynzmade, and we'll see you on the next episode.